9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
World War I, the Great War. World War I, often referred to as the Great War, was a global conflict that reshaped the course of history. It began on July 28, 1914, and lasted until November 11, 1918, involving nations from across the world. The war pitted the Allied powers, including France, Russia, Britain, Italy, and later the United States, against the Central Powers, led by Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. This conflict was unprecedented in its scale, brutality, and impact, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new, turbulent century. The roots of World War I can be traced back to a complex web of political, economic, and social factors that had been simmering for decades. One of the primary causes was militarism, as European nations engaged in an intense arms race, building up their armies and navies in a bid to assert dominance. This militarization created an atmosphere of tension and suspicion, as each country sought to outmatch its rivals. Alongside militarism, the system of alliances further complicated the geopolitical landscape. Nations formed intricate treaties and agreements, binding themselves to support one another in the event of war. While these alliances were intended to maintain a balance of power, they also meant that a conflict between two nations could quickly escalate into a global war. Imperialism also played a significant role in fueling the tensions that led to World War I. European powers competed fiercely for colonies and resources across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. This competition often brought them into direct conflict, as each nation sought to expand its empire and secure its economic interests. Nationalism, too, was a powerful force, as people across Europe took immense pride in their nations and cultures. However, this sense of national pride often manifested as hostility toward other nations, particularly in regions like the Balkans, where ethnic and political tensions were high. The immediate trigger for World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary on June 28, 1914. The Archduke was heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his assassination in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist set off a chain reaction of events. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issued a series of harsh demands to Serbia, which Serbia could not fully accept. When diplomatic efforts failed, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. This declaration of war activated the alliance system, drawing in Russia, Germany, France, and Britain. Within weeks, Europe was engulfed in a conflict that would soon spread across the globe. The early stages of the war were marked by rapid movements and large-scale battles. Germany, seeking to avoid a prolonged two-front war, implemented the Schlieffen Plan, which called for a swift invasion of France through neutral Belgium. The goal was to defeat France quickly before turning east to confront Russia. However, the plan faltered as German forces encountered fierce resistance from the French and British at the Battle of the Marne in September 1914. This battle marked the end of mobile warfare on the Western Front and the beginning of a grueling stalemate. Both sides dug in, creating elaborate systems of trenches that stretched from the North Sea to the Swiss border. Trench warfare became the defining feature of World War I on the Western Front. Soldiers lived in harsh, unsanitary conditions, enduring mud, rats, and the constant threat of enemy fire. The area between opposing trenches, known as no man's land, was a deadly expanse of barbed wire, shell craters, and machine gun fire. Attacks often resulted in minimal gains at a tremendous cost in human life. Battles like Verdun and the Somme in 1916 exemplified the futility and horror of trench warfare, with millions of casualties on both sides. Despite the staggering losses, neither side could achieve a decisive breakthrough. While the Western Front was characterized by stalemate, the Eastern Front saw more fluid and dynamic fighting. Here, Germany and Austria-Hungary faced off against Russia. The vastness of the Eastern Front allowed for greater mobility, but the fighting was no less brutal. Russia initially made gains against Austria-Hungary but suffered devastating defeats at the hands of Germany. The Russian army, plagued by poor leadership, inadequate supplies, and low morale, struggled to sustain its war effort. The strain of the war exacerbated existing social and economic problems in Russia, leading to the Russian Revolution of 1917. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power and eventually signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany, taking Russia out of the war. The war also extended beyond Europe, with fighting taking place in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. The Ottoman Empire, allied with the Central Powers, played a significant role in these theaters. One of the most famous campaigns was the Gallipoli Campaign of 1915, in which Allied forces attempted to open a supply route to Russia by capturing the Dardanelles Strait. The campaign ended in failure with heavy casualties on both sides. In the Middle East, the Arab revolt, supported by Britain, sought to weaken the Ottoman Empire. Figures like T. Lawrence, also known as Lawrence of Arabia, became legendary for their roles in these campaigns. At sea, the war saw the use of new technologies and tactics. Germany's U-boats, or submarines, waged a campaign of unrestricted submarine warfare, targeting Allied and neutral ships in an effort to cut off supplies to Britain. This strategy brought the United States into the war in 1917, after American ships were sunk and the Zimmermann telegram, in which Germany proposed an alliance with Mexico against the U.S., was intercepted. The entry of the United States provided a significant boost to the Allied war effort, both in terms of manpower and resources. The final year of the war, 1918, saw a series of major offensives that ultimately led to the collapse of the Central Powers. Germany launched the Spring Offensive, also known as the Kaiserschlacht, in a last-ditch effort to win the war before American forces could fully deploy. Although initially successful, the offensive ultimately failed, exhausting Germany's remaining resources. In response, the Allies launched the 100 Days Offensive, a series of coordinated attacks that pushed German forces back. By the fall of 1918, it was clear that Germany could not continue the fight. On November 11, 1918, an armistice was signed, bringing an end to the fighting. The aftermath of World War I was profound and far-reaching. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, imposed harsh terms on Germany, including significant territorial losses, military restrictions, and reparations payments. These terms sowed resentment in Germany and contributed to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, setting the stage for World War II. The war also led to the collapse of empires, including the Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, Russian, and German empires, and the redrawing of national borders. New nations emerged, and the League of Nations was established in an attempt to prevent future conflicts. World War I had a devastating human cost. Over 9 million soldiers and 7 million civilians lost their lives, with millions more injured or displaced. The war also had a profound psychological impact, shattering the optimism of the pre-war era and leading to a sense of disillusionment. The horrors of the war were captured in literature, art, and poetry, with works like Erich Maria Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front, and Wilfred Owen's poems providing powerful testimonies to the suffering endured by soldiers. In conclusion, World War I was a transformative event that reshaped the world in ways that are still felt today. It marked the end of old empires and the beginning of a new era of geopolitical instability. The war introduced new technologies and tactics that changed the nature of warfare, and its legacy continues to influence international relations. As we reflect on the Great War, we are reminded of the importance of diplomacy, cooperation, and the pursuit of peace in preventing such a catastrophic conflict from happening again.